Alright, and welcome to another tutorial. So this is going to be a basic UV unwrapping tutorial. I'm just going to cover like the very basics on how to create your own UV maps for this cube over here. And if you make it to the end of the tutorial, I'll just show you on how to create like a very basic metallic texture, or not texture, material to use with your newly UV unwrapped cube over here. Now this is very basic. It doesn't like require any texture knowledge or anything like that. We're just going to put some color values into it so that we can just get like this nice shiny cube, and you can like edit all the details later on. So that's it. Let's just jump straight into the tutorial. Now this isn't so much going to be a modeling tutorial as more of just a basic demonstration on how to get a very basic UV map and then importing your model into Unreal Engine 4. So this is based under the assumption that you do know a little bit about Blender and the controls of Blender, so that you can follow along. But if you can't and you're kind of like wondering what buttons I'm pushing here, at the bottom left my screencast keys is enabled. So if I go into a side view or a front view or of a graphic or perspective, it should show up here which buttons I'm pushing. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to show you the UV maps that I created for this model. In order to do that, I just push tab to go into edit mode, or otherwise you can just select it from the bottom here. And then if I click here and go into my UV image editor, now, if you don't see anything here, you just have to make sure that everything is selected. So you can push A to select or deselect. So if you deselect and you go back into, you'll see there's nothing here. And if you go select it all again, you'll see that everything is selected here. Now, these are basic UVs, which I did set up in a very, very crude manner, just to give like a basic demonstration of how this should work. I could have actually moved this. This should have been connected here, and this should have been at the bottom here. So this is actually quite terrible UV maps, but it's just for the basic demonstration purposes. So I'm not going to use this as the practice for you to create your own UVs. We're just going to use a basic cube. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into one of Blender's layers here, which is completely devoid and nothing in there, and push Shift A and just add a basic cube. Now this is similar to the starter cube inside of Blender. So you can use the starter cube if you want, but I just created my own one. Now here at the bottom left, you should see there is an option to generate UVs. Now to show you what that does is, if you go into your UV image editor, all Blender's basic geometry does have its own UVs. So this already takes some of the work. If you just want the basic cube, you just want to import it. There we go. All the work is basically done for you already, and you can just continue on your way and start texturing. But what I want to do is, let's say what I did with the other cube is, because all the sides are basically going to be the same, I did cheat by deleting the other sides and just duplicating one side and UV unwrapping that, which means that if you go into this model, you'll see that each individual side of the cube has its own, so you can paint numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it should display on every side differently, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But what I did is I just created one side, and sorry, let's just go back to selecting all of them. I created one side, so if I write the number there 1, it is going to display on every single side as 1. Now this was easier for me if I want to create, like, for instance, a cube that all the sides are going to be identical in texture. So you can just create one side and just duplicate it over and over. It just makes the process easier. Overlapping UVs, which means that if you share one UV coordinate with every single one of your sides, so this side and this side uses the same UV maps, is not it's not a bad thing. The only thing that happens is, for instance, if you have light maps, which we'll cover much later inside of Unreal, those cannot overlap. But Unreal also has an option to auto-generate those, so that's not even really relevant anymore. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take these sides, and I'm actually just going to delete it all, so that we only have one side here. Now, if I select it and I go back into my UV image editor, you'll see that it's one of the cubes that was there in the middle, but I wanted to span this entire area, so I need to unwrap it again. So before we do that, I'm just going to jump into the side view, and then I'm just going to right click when you'll see my mouse cursor changes there, and if you right click, you can split off the area. And then I'm going to switch this one to UV image editor. There's another way to do this as well. So let's just join these areas together. If you just click here and drag, you can do the same by splitting off the two areas. Or click here and drag. There we go. So if your mouse cursor doesn't change, you can always just click and drag over there and do the same thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, on my modeling side here, I'm still in edit mode, select everything, I'm going to hit U and click unwrap. And now you'll see that it did unwrap, filling the entire space. So I'm not going to give it a texture just yet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm literally just going to duplicate it. So Shift D, and holding Control, I'm just going to, let's rotate it first. Holding Control, I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. You hit R and then just type in, and it rotates according to what angle you're looking at. So if I'm looking from this angle and hit R and I rotate, you'll see that it's like completely off. So if I'm looking from the top in orthographic view, not perspective view, so numpad 5, you'll see that I rotate it and it rotates it perfectly. So again, let's just hit Shift D. R to rotate, we're going to do this negative 90 degrees, and then holding Control, just move it to that side. Now it's important to hold Control because you're snapping to grid. So you see all these little blocks over here, you're snapping to grid. If you don't hold Control and you hit G and you move it around, it's not going to line up with the other vertices over here. You want them to line up because you essentially want the model eventually to use like the same space. Okay, so let's just select these again and Shift D and rotate and move that over there. Okay, now something I didn't cover is I hit Z to go into like a wireframe mode, and that's easier so you could just see through it. So sorry about that, I didn't cover that, but if you hit Z, you go into wireframe mode. Okay, and now I'm just going to do the top part, so I'm going to hit that and select all of it. Also another thing, Control L, if you select a vertex or a face or anything, we could have actually just jumped over to face mode and selected like that, but I normally work in like the vertex select mode. If you hit Control L, it will select everything that is linked to that vertex. So if all these sides were actually like joined together and you hit Control L, it would actually selected all of them together. Okay, so I'm just going to go into a side view, go back into wireframe mode, hit Shift D. Okay, and I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees and holding Control and G, just go and move it up. And then this one, same thing, Shift D, I'm going to copy it to the bottom. Now, the reason why I rotate and why I didn't rotate this one now is that actually if you look at it, a plane in this way only has like one solid side. So you see the top and the bottom are like two different colors. So it will only display the top one in your texture and the bottom side will be like completely transparent. Now, you'll notice that if I join all of these together, this bottom one will be grayed out a little bit, but we'll fix that now, because essentially what that will mean is that because it's pointing the same direction as this one, because I just duplicated, it will show the texture on the inside of the model, and if you look at it from the outside, it will be completely transparent so you can actually see through it. But I will cover on how to fix that. Okay, so now with all our sides done, I'm just going to select them all, Control A. No, sorry, not Control A, just A. Push A, select them all. And then here at your transform, under your tools, sorry, not transform, just under tools, you go and you'll see there's an option to remove. Now, remove doubles. Now, because these vertices are like sharing the same space, because I used the grid to actually move them around, and I held control when I moved it around. If I click remove doubles, it should remove all the duplicate vertices. So what that means is that if I right click one of these now, you'll see that, okay, that's the top one. See, they're not joined. So if I just select all of them again and I click remove, you'll see at the top here it says remove 16 vertices. So if I grab that, you'll see they're joined now. So they're all basically one model. But now again, you'll see that this bottom part is a little bit darker. Now what that means is, like I said, its areas flipped upwards, which means its normals are flipped upwards. Now a way to fix that, the quick way, if you know the keyboard shortcuts, is to hit Control N and it will recalculate the normals. Other way is just go to Mesh, click Normals and recalculate outside. There we go, you see its color changed. And now we have a UV unwrapped cube that is sharing the same space over here. Okay, so that is basically it done. And now you can mess around with it a little bit. If you hit Control B, you can bevel it. And you can see that, oh, it actually bevels all the corners, and that actually doesn't look too bad. Just see here. And it still kind of keeps to your model's geometry and sides and everything. So you can mess around with it a little bit, but it is best to, whenever you do modeling and you change a model, just to redo your UV maps. This is cheating a little bit. I did manage to make a fairly nice looking cube by just like using the bevel modifier, or just beveling it out a little bit, then using a high resolution model to create the details onto the lower resolution. But that's something I will cover later on, not to ramble. Okay, so that's basically it done. So we can export this cube. Now, a few things that you just want to do first is when you're in object mode, you just want to enable smooth shading, and you'll see that the model will change a little bit. And then I'm just going to go over to this tab over here, the data tab, and enable auto smooth, and you'll see it will go back to looking like it's flat shaded on the sides. Now, the reason why you do that is sometimes flat shading, you can export a flat shaded model directly into Unreal Engine 4, but if you're doing it for something that, let's say, is like a ball, it will have like flat corners all around that will just look terrible. So smooth shading is just a way to get your model to display smoother, and you just enable like the auto smooth function over there, and it should look a little bit better. Okay, not to ramble on too much about the modeling process, but okay, so here I'm just going to hit, as with the first tutorial, export FBX, and selected object only. Geometries, I'm going to go with the smoothing over to edge, and then nothing else really matters because we don't have animations, so it's just these two options. I'll call it the create final, even though it's not going to be the final model, but yes, we will still be working on it. So if we jump over to Unreal and click import, and I just go over to, oh, it's over here, the create final, and import it. I'm not going to touch any of these options, but you will see what I did mention about generating light maps. I think the option is here somewhere. I can't recall exactly where it is. There we go. Generate light map UVs. If you deselect that, I'll show you what light map UVs are, but Unreal essentially auto-generates them now, so it's not really required on your basic items like this. Okay, so I'm just going to click import. And as the same with our cube over here, we just drag it in, and it's also like the same size as what this one was when we first imported it, so we just size it down. Okay, it's doing something strange. Okay, Let's try this again. There we go. All right. So that basically is the model done, imported with its UV maps. If we double click on the model inside and we go over to UV and we check the channel number 1, you'll see that there we go. It's the full on side over here. So the UV channel 0, sorry, it's not number 1, it's number 0, is the one that you created. The channel number 1, that is the light map pack that Unreal automatically generated for you. Now you're not going to use that for texturing or anything like that. That's just going to be used for basic shading information or something like not shading, generating shadows onto the model if you use pre-generated shadows. Okay, so I'm just going to close that off. And that's done for this tutorial, but what I wanted to do is just quickly give you a taster on how to create a basic material. So let's just quickly make a quick metal material. Okay, so inside of Unreal Engine 4, in a blank open space over here, you're just going to right click and then material. You can give it a name, so we can go create metal, and we're going to double click just to open it. Now we're not going to import any textures or anything like that. We're just going to create something that has color and some values over here. Okay, so right click and get your search options. I'm just going to add a vector parameter, and I'm going to give it a name here at the left. I'm just going to call it color, and I'm going to feed it into the base color. Now we can create different vector parameters or just parameters, but I'm going to use just a constant just to feed it into the metal values. So I'm going to create a constant, and I'm going to hit Control C and Control V just to copy it. So first, over here, let's just give it a color before we get into what these constant values actually do. Okay, so here, if you click on your parameter, you'll see that there's the color value. If you click on it there, it brings up a color picker, and you can actually use a color picker and just go anywhere if you have a random color that you want to use, or you can just move this around until you find the color. But obviously you would have to set your tone up a little bit so that you're not just using a dark color. All right, let's just get something that looks a little bit red. Move it a little bit more up. That's an orange. I like that orange, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, so the first constant that we're going to create, or that we created, we're just going to feed into metallic. And the second one, we're going to feed into roughness. Now, if you want your cube to be full on metallic, that will be a value of 1. Now you can use a texture for this, and we'll cover later on how to create PBR textures and things like that. But for now, we're just going to give it a value, let's say, of 1. So now it's full on metallic, and you see here at the left, let's just make this a little bit bigger. It's full on shiny. And your roughness value, same thing. You can set this to 0.5. And then you'll see that it changes a little bit. So you're gonna have to play around with this a little bit until you get a value that you want. I actually like that. That looks like a very nice value. So we're going to go with a metallic value of 1 and a roughness value of 0.3. Now actually, if we change this metallic value back to 0, you'll see that the roughness value is still there, but it doesn't look metallic anymore. It almost looks plastic now. So just keep that in mind if you like changing things around. And that essentially is it. So I'm just going to click Save and close this out. Now there are 2 ways to apply this. You can either just click on your crate here and then click the material and just click here to use the selected asset from the content browser, or if you're going to use different materials for different cubes that you created. So let's say we copy this. So for instance here, if I use this by using the model that I created here at the bottom, the original model, and I just click for it to use, oh sorry, here under material, it will use the materials, it actually should use them for all the models. Oh, it's because I had the one selected in the viewport over here. Okay, so let's just delete all of these. Okay, so here again, sorry about that. Here it's got a material slot, and if you say use that material, you click save, every cube that you drag in will use the same material. Whereas if it wasn't selected like before, just clear, there we go. If it wasn't selected like before and you just drag cubes in, and you can drag it onto from the content browser here, you can drag it onto the mesh, or you can just select the mesh and click use a material over here. So you can apply like different materials to different meshes using this method. And we can also apply it to that one, and now you can actually see what it looks like. Okay, so that is just your basic way on how to get a nice looking material onto your model. Now this is just a very, very basic material. I just wanted to give you something that you can work with so that you can later on just like start to experiment in your own ways. I am going to cover a little bit more in the next video so that you can actually see how to get more detail onto your model and how to just add different textures, and how we can just get like a very nice high detailed looking model from using like just very basic methods. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of this tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.